2, 1. This is Chris Gardner of the Houston Roundball Review with a interview. I haven't done a few interviews in a while. I got a guest joining me, Rhossi Carron of U Sports Group. That's the official title, right? You weren't with that officially last year when we talked. So how you doing, first of all?
I'm doing well, Chris. How's everything going your way?
Doing pretty well. So tell me about the U Sports. You're a consultant for U Sports Group. Tell me about that.
U Sports Group was kind of founded as I transitioned out of grassroots basketball. I wanted to kind of take some of the experience and some of the relationships that I kind of cultivated over my 15 years in grassroots and, be able to take the things that we were doing and just kind of take it to the collegiate level. So it's something that we're really excited about. We have a number of events lined up over the next few years, and we're just looking to build a platform that gives athletes a chance to compete at a high level and then also have some community component attached to it where they can give back and help kids in the community. So we're really excited about it.
And that's the event you have upcoming as well, while we're really talking today. So let's get into it, man. You got one event coming up first soon, and then you have a plan. You made national news with your concept of a bubble concept for December. So first things first, tell me about the first event.
So we actually have 2 events lined up for the upcoming season. And that's, hoping that the COVID virus kind of subsides or takes a turn for the better. We have an event on November the 13th in Dallas, Texas, which is called Hoop Hype XL College Basketball Showcase. And that event features Oklahoma State versus North Texas. And that event will also be a doubleheader, and we're still waiting to kind of finalize that second game. And then we have an event on December 18th at the Toyota Center, which is the Battleground 2K20, which will feature a matchup between Texas A&M versus Boise State in the first game, and then the University of Texas versus Louisiana Tech in the second game. So we have 2 great events that we're really fired up about, and we're really hoping to be able to do both of those events because there's some high-level teams involved.
When will you get, I guess, a definite answer, yay or nay, that those events will take place?
This thing is the thing that makes it tough about COVID-19 and its effect, not just on our daily lives, but on the sports industry, is that there is no exact timeline. There's no exact timetable. Everything is kind of fluid, and it makes it tough to plan. I mean, from event operators like myself to universities that are preparing to play games. I mean, even college coaches, they don't know how much workouts or training they should be doing now because they don't know what the ramp up time is till the season start. And then even for the NCAA, trying to figure out when to start the season, how that affects non-conference play and conference play, and then ultimately the NCAA tournament. So I think this thing is fluid. It's kind of a day-by-day basis. We're waiting to get clarity from the NCAA, which I think they've said that should be somewhere around mid-September, where we'll know the start of the season and hopefully what the format or the outlook looks like. And then from there, we'll collaborate with the universities that are involved in our existing events, and then try to figure out what's the next best step to protect student athletes and help make sure that they're safe.
Based on what the NCAA says in September, is there a possibility that you won't have those 2 events take place?
I think that based on what the NCAA says in September, there's a possibility that no one will have events. I mean, the NCAA can move the season back to January if that's what they feel is the best course of action to protect student athletes. So I think for all of us, it's just kind of wait and see. One of the things that we try to do is be really proactive and kind of plan just in case things kind of turn left or the direction went different than we initially anticipated. So we just want to be prepared that we have a basketball platform that can accommodate whichever way the NCAA goes with the upcoming season.
When did you first come up with the bubble concept?
So the bubble concept was initially not necessarily a bubble. The goal was to try to figure out how to protect the student athletes who were participating in our existing events, Hoop Hype XL and the Battleground 2K. So we were kind of looking at different ways. what if the NCAA moves the season back to January? What do we do? So we were kind of thinking, well, let's figure out how to combine those 2 doubleheaders, which would make 1 day of quadruple headers or 2 days of doubleheaders, insulate those teams, quarantine them for a day or so, make sure we test. So we were just trying to provide some preventative measures just in case something happened with the season. Then I was talking to a good buddy of mine who's here at one of the local high major schools, an assistant there, and we were just kind of kicking ideas off each other. We talk every week, and we were talking about different scenarios, and he said something that hit home with me. He said, "Man, the only way to play games this year is in a bubble." He said, "You better figure out how to have a bubble." And so from there, I just kind of took some of the preventative. We had already been looking at COVID testing and procedures and protocols and measures in place to keep the area sanitized and to protect the athletes as they come into the venue. So we had some things already in place. But when he said that, it clicked, and then we just kind of started putting together something that we thought was pretty comparable to what the NBA was doing with their bubble, because they've proven that it can be successful. Now, obviously, they're doing it on a far grander scale than any of us will be able to do it on, but they've given us the blueprint. So we studied their bubble. We studied other companies and corporations who've done kind of mini bubbles for their businesses to protect their employees. And we consulted with medical professionals and doctors, and we came up with what we feel like is a viable option for a non-conference schedule to protect the health and safety of student athletes and still provide a competitive environment for those teams.
What will be the protocol for the event November 13th?
For November 13th?
Yes.
So for November 13th, the way things, well, it's hard to say the way things are because they could be different in an hour. The goal there would be to provide some negative tests, which would be done on campus before the teams arrive. Again, a lot of that will be predicated on how many games they have leading up to the event and the travel time. Was, for instance, so for North Texas, they're right there in Dallas, so it's easier for them to provide some negative tests for those athletes, and the athletes who test positive will hopefully be able to kind of stay on campus and quarantine. But for those athletes who travel, when they arrive, we would test them again, and then hopefully be able to test them on the day of the game. And one of the biggest hangups in all of this for all of us is where testing and medical research is 2.5, 3 months from now. We've all heard things about the saliva test and how much more efficient it is. We don't necessarily know how much more effective it is as it relates to providing false negatives or false positives. But the cost should be significantly less. But we don't know, again, how readily available it will be to individuals and to businesses on different fronts. So again, we're planning, but there's still a lot of things that that remain to be decided as we move closer.
Has a venue been set for the Hoops Hype XL?
For Hoop Hype XL, yes, it has. So it'll be held at Comerica Center, which is in Frisco.
Okay.
And that's the home of the Dallas Mavericks G League team.
Okay.
So it's a really nice arena, but it's a smaller arena. And the reason that we chose that arena is because, as of today, if we had a game, no fans would be allowed. And if the state allowed fans to participate, it would be a small number. So initially we were planning on using a much larger arena, but in that case we say let's make it a little more intimate, so that if the case is, hey, only 1,000 fans can attend, that the gym doesn't appear as empty as if you have a 20,000 seat arena. So the Comerica Center is where we're scheduled to play on November 13th in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area.
Getting back to the bubble concept, would that take place in Houston?
The Battle in the Bubble is
not the Battleground 2K, but the concept of
okay, the Battle in the Bubble is kind of
okay
calling it. Yes, it will take place in Houston. We are pretty far along on our event format and concept. We are kind of down to 3 locations that we would probably solidify by the end of this week or early next week. And it's 3 places that we feel pretty good about. And Houston has been great. I mean, we've gotten calls from all over, from different hotels and venues, in hopes that we would bring the event to that particular location. So that Houston has been great. They've been supportive. But I think we kind of found 3 places that we feel great about, and we hope to kind of lock down and zero in on one of those locations here in the next 10 days or so. But we're pretty close.
Well, have you agreed upon a total number of participants for the Battle of the Bubble?
So our initial proposal that we sent out, initially we sent it out to 50 teams, and we got great response. Once it went out, kind of spread word of mouth and through, kind of various national articles, we've had over 80 teams call to figure out if it's something that could be a viable option for that program. Again, a lot of things are up in the air. We still have to wait to see what the NCAA says and what some of the individual conferences have to say about the upcoming season. But there's a ton of interest. Our initial proposal, we sent out to another 25 teams this week. So probably about 75 teams have the proposal in their hands. And that proposal is based on 20 teams, which will be divided into 2 divisions. And each team will play 1 scrimmage and 8 non-conference games over the course of a 3-week span, which would be about December 1st to December 21st. And we're targeting that sweet spot in between the Thanksgiving break and Christmas. And the reason that we're doing that is because most universities will end the first semester right before Thanksgiving break, which would give teams about a 7 or 8 day span to be on campus by themselves. So we would ask the team to do what we call team isolate, where they can practice and work out together, but they will not be allowed to have any contact outside of their team. We would ask them to test every other day, and then also provide negative tests on the day of travel as they travel to Houston. Teams will only be allowed to travel by charter bus or by charter flight, which is, to try to cut down on the risk of coming in contact with anyone who may have the virus. So, that sweet spot is there. We're looking at 20 teams based on the venue that we select and what the NCAA allows for maximum number of games and maximum number of teams. We could accommodate probably up to 32 teams. So okay. We're kind of waiting to see, but the initial plan is 20 teams, 2 divisions, 1 scrimmage, 8 games between December 1st and December 21st.
If you decided to go the 32 team route, what will be the format for that?
If we went with the 32 team route, we would probably do 4 divisions of 8, if that math works out right.
Right, it does, yeah.
We do 4 divisions of 8 and probably do 7 non-conference games per team. So it'll be a similar format. Instead of extending the number of days of the event, we would probably just include an additional game court. So right now we're looking at 1 game court, 2 practice courts, and a weight room facility, so that teams could basically play games every other day or every 2 days, but for the duration of the event. And then on the off days, they'll have opportunity, obviously, to practice and get in the weight room and spend some time there with their strength coach. So we would probably have to add another game court, which is fine. The venues that we're looking at can accommodate that to kind of expedite those games and still stay within that 3-week window, which we think is kind of the sweet spot for these types of events.
Now, would the teams, if this happens and is approved, are the teams responsible for the expenses?
Yes, the teams will be responsible for an entry fee to participate. And the way we've kind of laid this thing out, and I think is one of the reasons why everyone said that we can't do a bubble for college basketball. I mean, you remember 3 or 4 months ago, everybody was saying, hey, well, it works in the NBA, you can't do it in college basketball because it's an expensive endeavor.
Right.
The NBA has unlimited resources, whereas college basketball is a little different. But the way we formatted it is that the college basketball programs would contribute to make this event happen. And again, what they're paying for is a safe, secluded, competitive environment that puts the priority of the student athletes' health number one. So the way we look at it is each team has a budget that's already set for buy games for the upcoming season. And, if you're in that space, you kind of know what those numbers look like. Well, if the season takes a turn and you can't play a traditional non-conference schedule, that buy game budget, you're not going to use it. So we would utilize that budget to be able to put this together. So, in a standard year, you may be the amount of money that you would use to pay for 4 buy games, which a buy game is where a team would pay an opponent to come on their campus to play a game, which they use to cover travel expenses and other things. And some programs use that buy game money to basically fund their entire season.
Right.
Some of them use to fund their season and the season of some of the other sports in the other programs. So they would utilize that money. And as of today, if you have a buy game, let's say you pay a team to come to your arena, right? You can't have fans, which means you can't sell tickets, which means you can't make money on parking or concessions.
Right.
Even if you tried to use that money this year, it would almost be a waste. So you would potentially play, if you look at a high major opponent, if they have 5 buy games, they would potentially play 5 low major opponents to come to their arena to play in an empty arena. Whereas in our concept, they would use those funds. They could come in and get 4 high major games, 2 mid major games, and 2 low major games in a 3-week span in a safe, secluded environment. And then now it's time for Christmas break. And then after Christmas break, you go on to conference play. So you can knock out your entire non-conference schedule within the platform that we have built.
You just touched on a little bit. I was going to ask you, what is the breakdown of teams in terms of level of D1?
Yep. So our goal is kind of the phrase we're using is to provide an opportunity for Division I basketball programs to complete an abbreviated non-conference schedule in a safe environment. And if you look at a typical non-conference schedule for most teams, it typically consists of, 3 or 4 high major games, a couple games, mid-major, mid-plus programs, and then those typical buy games that they would kind of squeeze in, which could be 3 or 4 of those games. So when you condense that schedule, the format that we've come up with is 4, kind of power 5 games, 2 mid-major, mid-plus games, and then, 2 low major games, which would kind of give you every level of competition, and it'll allow you to be able to really see where your team is and to prepare for the conference schedule. And based on the way things are today, our medical team is telling us that most conferences, in order to make this season work, are going to have to go to bubbles or pods too. So, there may not be any games outside of bubbles and pods this year. And depending on the vaccine and how readily available it is, the effects of it, and people's confidence to take it, we may still be dealing with COVID 12 months from now.
True.
Surprised if we're still wearing masks, next August as we prepare for the next college basketball season. So this may be something that takes place over a 2-year span. So we're already starting to kind of look at next year and what that looks like. But I wouldn't be surprised, again, if you and I are both walking around with masks on this time next year.
I agree with that. We're almost done, Rhossi. Thank you for taking time to talk to me.
It's all good.
Have you been in discussions with any TV networks to broadcast the games? So
we're still working on that aspect of it. So our events that we have set now, Hoop Hype XL and the Battleground 2K, would be broadcast on one of the ESPN networks.
Okay.
So a lot of, the television component is going to be predicated on the footprint of some of the teams, how the NCAA kind of mandates the formats of these games. Are they considered a typical non-conference game? Are they considered, some form of MTE? So we don't know yet until the NCAA gives further direction of how these games will be. I can't think of the word, but how these games will be identified. And from there we would know. But last year we partnered with ESPN, and this year our events coming up will was scheduled to be on the ESPN platforms. But again, we won't know the TV side until the NCAA makes a decision. But I don't think we would have any issues with the TV part with some of the teams that we kind of have in the fold.
And to your credit, you are discussing all these things. You're planning ahead, unlike some folks I won't name, some sports I won't name. So I commend you for that. Is there anything you want to say in conclusion as we wrap it up?
I think that this last 6 months and the COVID virus and how it's impacted our lives, and again the sports industry, has shown us just how important that sports are to everyone. And we just want to do our part to contribute to help support what the NCAA is doing and what college basketball is doing to kind of push the sport forward, to allow these student athletes to be able to do what they love to do, which is to be able to compete at a high level. But the most important thing of all of this to us is to make sure that the student athletes are safe, that they're healthy, and that we're taking the proper measures to ensure their safety. So we're excited about the opportunity to create a bubble, but we're focused right now on trying to make sure that the events that we have in place, which we are ecstatic about, we're hoping that those will run. But if they don't, then we have an alternative plan that will be able to include anywhere from 20 to 32 teams and to provide a safe, secluded environment for those student athletes to compete. So we're excited about it. We look forward to the challenge, either direction it goes.
Rhossi Carron from Youth Sports Group. How can folks keep up with you if they want to get in touch with you or follow you on social media?
On social media, our social media handle is at the letter U Sports with an S Group. And then on social media, I think my social media handle is at Rhossi, that's RHOSSI _ Carron, CARRON. And then our website is usportsgroup.com. So they can follow us on our social channels, or they can connect with us via our website, usportsgroup.com.
Rhossi Carron, Youth Sports Group. Thank you very much for taking time for speaking to me, man. You take care.
Appreciate you. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man.